As we head into the final stretch of the year, both home buyers and home sellers have been pulling back from the marketplace in what's traditionally a slower time of the year for the Vancouver housing market. And despite the positive rebound we saw in the market in October, that momentum did not continue in the month of November. I'm Adina with Adina YVR Vancouver Real Estate Group and Oakland Realty here with your December 2025 market update. Let's jump right into the numbers and take a look at what's happening. Let's start off looking at home sales. In the month of November, Greater Vancouver Realtors reported 1,846 homes sold on the MLS. This is down 18% relative to October, and it's down 15% relative to November last year. This number is down 21% relative to the 10-year sales average for the month of November. Looking at this by property type, we see that for detached homes, we had 541 home sales reported. This is a 13.5% decrease relative to November last year. For attached townhomes and duplexes, we had 350 home sales registered, and this is a decrease of 22% relative to November last year. And for condo apartments, we had 945 homes sold in November. This is a decrease of 13% relative to November last year. Now, this isn't necessarily surprising, as traditionally at this time of year, we do start seeing a lot of buyers starting to pull back and deciding to wait until the new year to make their home buying decisions. And it wasn't just buyers who were pulling back. We saw home sellers also being less active in the month of November. We saw 3,674 homes newly listed for sale on the MLS, and this is a decrease of 32% relative to October, and it's a decrease of 1% relative to this time last year. And this total was just 3% relative to the 10-year sales average for the month of November. So how does this impact our total inventory? Well, in the month of November, we had just over 15,000 homes in total listed on the MLS. And this is a decrease of about 8% relative to October, but it's still up about 14% relative to last year, and it's up 36% relative to the 10-year sales average for the month of November. With total inventory levels remaining high and the pace of sales decreasing, we saw a negative impact on our sales to active listings ratio, and it decreased from 14.2% in October down to 12.6% in November. This means that we moved from a balanced market down towards a buyer's market back in November. And while this is still higher than it was in September and August, it is lower than it was in July and in the spring of this year. And as you may recall from our previous updates, you know that the sales to active listings ratio is really important, as it's our leading indicator showing us if prices are on their way up or down. Analysts have shown that when the sales to active listings ratio is above 20% for a sustained period of time, we're in seller's market territory and prices are on their way up. And when this ratio is below 12% for a sustained period of time, we're in buyer's market territory and prices are typically on their way down. Anything between 12 to 20% is considered balanced market territory, where prices stabilize. So being at 12.6%, we're right on the cusp of buyer's market territory again, meaning that we may start seeing price declines if this pace continues. Looking at this by property type, we see that for detached homes, the sales to active listings ratio was 9.7%. This is still in buyer's market territory, yet it's down from the previous month when it was 11.3%. For attached townhomes and duplexes, the sales to active listings ratio is 13.6%. This has remained in balanced market territory, but it's still down relative to October when we were at 17.6%. And for condo apartments, we're currently at 14.8%, which again is balanced market territory, but it is down slightly from October when we were at 15.5%. Looking at this broken down by submarkets, we see that for the downtown market, we saw sales decreasing by 1%, whereas inventory levels decreased 6%. So the sales to active listings ratio remained in balanced market territory at 13%. On the west side of Vancouver, for detached homes, sales decreased 15%, whereas inventory levels decreased 6%. And the sales to active listings ratio dropped to 8% from 9% the previous month, and it remains in buyer's market territory. On the west side of Vancouver, for attached homes, we see that sales dropped 20%, whereas inventory dropped 4%. And the sales to active listings ratio dropped slightly to 15% from 18% in October, and this remains in balanced market territory. Shifting our focus to the east side of Vancouver, we see that in the detached market, sales dropped 44%, whereas inventory levels dropped 6%. And this caused the sales to active listings ratio to decline to 9%, which puts it in buyer's market territory, and it's a big shift from October when we were at 15% in balanced market territory. Staying on the east side of Vancouver, but looking at the attached home segment, we see that sales dropped 18%, whereas inventory levels dropped 13%. And as a result, the sales to active listings ratio dropped just slightly from 21% in October to 20% in November. So this remains right on the cusp of seller's market territory. In North Vancouver, in the detached segment, sales dropped 27%, whereas inventory levels dropped 16%, and the sales to active listings ratio shifted from 22% in October, which was seller's market territory, down to 19% in November, which is right on the cusp of a balanced market. And also in North Vancouver, in the attached home segment, we see that sales dropped 12%, whereas inventory levels dropped 14%. And the sales to active listings ratio actually increased slightly to 20%, up from 19% in October. So we're right on the cusp of a balanced to seller's market there. So how has all of this been impacting prices? Well, the HPI composite benchmark price for all property types is currently $1,123,700. This is a decline of 0.3% relative to October, and it's a decline of 3.9% relative to November last year. Looking at this broken down by property type, we see that for detached homes in Metro Vancouver, the HPI benchmark price is currently $1,900,600. This represents a decrease of 0.4% relative to October, and it's a decrease of 4.3% relative to November. For attached townhomes and duplexes in Metro Vancouver, the HPI benchmark price is currently $1,065,600. This represents an increase of 0.1% relative to October, and it's a decrease of 4.4% relative to November. And for condo apartments in Metro Vancouver, the HPI benchmark price is currently $714,300. This represents a decrease of 0.2% relative to October, and it's a decrease of 5.2% relative to November. With the holidays almost here and the new year right around the corner, if you're thinking of making a move in the next year, now is a great time to sit down and talk big picture and what your goals are for the coming year. If you'd like to sit down and discuss your options or get a better understanding of what's happening in the market, you're welcome to book a consult with me by clicking the link below if you're watching this on YouTube, or if you're watching this on Instagram, clicking the link in my bio. And in the meantime, to stay up to date with what's happening in the market, be sure to subscribe here on YouTube and follow me on Instagram at adina.ybr. That's it for now. Have a great rest of the month, and I can't wait to see you in January.